Last Christmas, Ohio came within minutes of experiencing blackouts over the holiday due to electricity demand exceeding available power supply. What are the chances of that happening again? Joining us on the podcast, CEO and President of Ohio's Electric Cooperatives, Pat O'Loughlin. Pat, welcome back. Great to see you. I have heard of Christmas whiteouts, but Christmas blackouts don't sound like a whole lot of fun.
Thanks, Ty. Great to be here with you. And as we get ready for winter again this year, we always are faced with certain challenges with the weather. Being here in Ohio, we can get a freezing cold blast like we got last Christmas. We occasionally can even get an ice storm that can be very destructive here. So we have to be ready for those things here in Ohio. But we've got some new problems that have been creeping up on us over the last few years. I think we've talked about them before. We continue to see increasing demand for electricity year over year and decreasing supply of electricity as more and more of our historic resources that we've depended on for decades have been retired. And last winter, during what we're now calling Winter Storm Elliott, we saw how close we can get. We were right here on the edge in Ohio. 9 other states nearby had to institute rolling blackouts just to keep supply and demand in balance. That's not something we ever want to do, but we were right there on the edge. As we look ahead to this winter, we've seen about another 5% of the generating resources here in our region of the country have been retired over this last year. And so we're in a little bit worse shape. We got a little bit more demand and a little bit less supply again. So we're hopeful that we won't have a big blast, or we'll be a little bit better prepared. I think we did learn some things last year as an industry. Buckeye Power fared very well, but some of the other newer natural gas plants hadn't been through the cold kind of winter that we had last Christmas. And I think they learned some things that maybe will help them perform better this year. We sure hope so. But it's just an increasingly worrisome situation as we get closer and closer on that supply and demand balance.
I want to talk more about those lessons learned and the preparedness, not just on behalf of Ohio's electric cooperatives, but also Ohioans across the state. So let's start there. What can consumers, as consumers of electricity, do to prepare and maybe conserve to get ready for what might be another possible blackout or rolling blackouts this winter?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, the easiest way to avoid those problems is if we can all pitch in and conserve a little bit more than we normally would during a real cold snap. So things like turning down your thermostat a few degrees, turning off some of the unnecessary things that you might have on, unplugging a couple things that you don't need, may help get us through without having to be even more inconvenienced than we might be otherwise. I guess the other thing that we're recommending people do is have what we'll call a go bag, that you're ready with some batteries and what you're going to do if you need to keep heat in your home, what your backup plans might be, or if you just need to go spend time with some relatives or friends to get out of your house if necessary. But I think just having like any kind of emergency, having a little bit of an action plan as to what you might do to keep yourself safe and as comfortable as you can if we are struck with such a thing. It's unlikely that something like that's going to hit widespread everybody. That's the whole point of doing these rolling blackouts, is to inconvenience everybody some, but not everybody all at once. And so there will be places and shelters that should open up at public buildings and things like that. But hey, it's something that we're not used to as an industry. It's not something we're not used to as electric consumers. But unfortunately, it's more and more part of our current day reality. So we need to be a little more prepared than we've been.
If there are challenges, you're going to know about it well before we do. So how do you intend on keeping your customers up to date on what's going on with our electricity?
Yeah. That's a great point. So we've tried, first of all, to get the word out like in forums like this to help people just be prepared generally. But and I think the other thing to be aware of is if we get below zero weather, we are in what we'd call a danger zone where we have to be careful. So be extra cautious if you know that weather is coming. And then we will generally get notice, but not as much as you'd like. Hopefully it'll be at least a half a day or a few hours. Last year it was only minutes, and by the way, it came in the middle of the night, so it's kind of hard to let people know what's going on in the middle of the night. But we're going to use our communication resources, primarily our social media and Facebook pages and our electric co-ops, to try to keep people informed.
We know this is, and maybe we'll get into the weeds a little bit. I do want to step back and talk about why we're having these issues. We're hearing about more electricity being developed in Ohio in some non-traditional ways. So why are we seeing a struggle with getting all that electricity to where it needs to go?
Yeah, so what we've seen is there are more renewable generation resources being developed here in Ohio, primarily solar, some wind. And that's very helpful most of the time. If you think about, though, the coldest part of a winter day is usually our peak demands in the winter are right before dawn and right after dark. People are turning their lights on. It's the coldest part of the day. And guess what? We're not getting any solar. So that doesn't really add anything. The other thing we've done is add a lot of natural gas plants around the state. Not as many as we've retired of coal plants, but we have added some. And we've continued to see difficulties on the coldest days of the year getting enough natural gas to keep people's homes and run their businesses and to run all the power plants that we've added. So there's a supply and demand imbalance on the natural gas side as well. More pipelines will help that, but they're not just right around the corner. They take years to plan and develop and build. And so right now we're a little bit behind the curve as an industry, both on energy infrastructure overall, I would say.
When we talk about food production and some challenges, we talk about it being a national security issue, right? And,
Yep.
and that's for food. I have to imagine on your side of the fence with electricity and power in general, that it's a national security issue. How do you go about talking with lawmakers to try to remedy some of the issues we're seeing now?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, there are national organizations. The North American Electric Reliability Council has been set up and sanctioned by the U.S. government to look after reliability, and they have, the last few successive reports have continued to warn of potential problems. And by the way, they most recently point out the biggest concern we have going forward is governmental policy. How that's forcing out some of our more traditional fossil fuel generation that we can count on in a pinch, and encouraging more renewable generation, which is slower to add. And like I said earlier, doesn't always work at the times when we need it. So that's been one of the things that's really been an issue that we're trying to deal with. For us, when we specifically talk to the legislators that are elected here to represent rural Ohio, it's a common sense message. Look, it is not only a national security issue, it's a personal safety and security issue. And we can all have different views about how much environmental improvements we can make and how fast we can make them. But if we break this machine that we call our electric grid, nobody's going to really understand that that's a good idea. And so we've got to balance those two things. It's something we can do, but there's a lot of momentum because all of these large energy infrastructure projects like electric generating plants take time to plan, to permit, to build. And so sometimes the answers might be years or decades away. And so we've got to just plan for that and slow down some of the retirements while we fill in with what we need to make things work. Got to keep it in balance.
Pat O'Loughlin, President and CEO of Ohio's Electric Cooperatives. I know he and his team are going to be working very hard over the winter months to keep us all lit and heated. And but it's important that we as consumers keep an eye out and be aware of what's happening with not just our weather, but our power supply. And Pat, appreciate your time and thanks for the great information.
Yeah, and please know your co-ops are doing everything they can to be prepared as well. We go through quite a winterization drill. We practice, we plan. We'll be as ready as we can be, and then Mother Nature is going to give us what we get, and we'll just have to do the best we can.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Since 1919, Ohio Farm Bureau has been working for you, advocating for farm families, for Ohio agriculture, and our local communities. From the State House in Columbus, all the way to Washington, D.C., Ohio Farm Bureau is feeding your need for new ideas. As we look towards the future and the changes coming along with it, one thing will never change. Our mission, working together for Ohio farmers to advance agriculture and strengthen our communities. Learn more and become a member today at ohiofarmbureau.org. Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. Farmers, do you still have bushels in storage? Have you invested your inputs for the 2024 crop year? Are you wondering what is driving current market prices and what could impact it moving forward? If you can answer yes to any of those questions, you're going to want to take part in a Farm Marketing Revealed webinar hosted by StoneX on December 12th. To get a preview, we bring in Tom Dosdahl. He's Senior Risk Management Consultant with StoneX. Tom, as always, it's great to see you.
Good afternoon, Ty. Good to be back with you.
We'll talk about the webinar in a bit, but for those who don't know, tell us about StoneX.
Yeah, StoneX, formerly FC Stone, financial risk management company. So we work with anybody who touches a commodity, anybody who has price risk across the spectrum, from the farmer all the way up to the end user. So I specifically work with directly on the farmer side, but we've got folks working with the commercial elevators on their hedging program, and we've got people in completely other commodity markets as well, precious metals, energies, you name it, anything with price movement, we're in there with boots on the ground expertise.
I can't imagine many farmers would answer no to all of those questions, talking about storage and inputs and markets. It's been an interesting marketing year. What have some of the major factors been in 2023?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we went from a big spike in prices there in the summer, which provided a nice lift based on some of the concerns over the drought across the center part of the country. Amazing, once again, what the seed genetics can do, and just a couple of rains and what kind of yields they can still turn out in some of this good ground area. So quickly we saw that those prices start to come down once the crop started to get made, and we got through those major weather risks. And here we are now at the end of the year, counting up the bushels, and it looks like we're going to have around a 2.1 billion bushel carry out for corn, and quite a bit tighter on the soybeans, which is helping to keep them supported. But we're shifting this market from what had been quite tight from the stocks to use standpoint in corn to one that's maybe now a little more adequate to even burdensome. And if you look at some of the projections out into next year for new crop, probably moving more toward that potentially burdensome category. So, very different marketing year here, where we're starting to see some carry come back in the market and some value there in storing the bushels as opposed to the last couple of years.
Seems like every marketing year has its own unique complexities, and with that comes different questions every year. What's been that most asked question from a farmer standpoint as they try to navigate the markets in 2023?
Yeah, are we at the lows yet? I think that's probably the most common one. We've gotten used to some higher priced markets for a while, and so I think everyone is still quite optimistic and trying to find that time where we're maybe at the bottom and starting to turn this thing around. So I think that folks have been pretty comfortable right now waiting this out, not being really hard pressed to make a lot of sales this year. And so, yeah, I'd say are the lows in yet has been the number one answer, and difficult one to answer unless you have the crystal ball, of course. But we are starting to see a little bit of a move back up now that we got past the first notice date for these December contracts. There was a lot of pressure on corn specifically heading into that. So, hopefully we're starting to carve out that bottom and start to build a little premium up as we head into the winter months.
Tell us about this webinar, December 12th, Farm Marketing Revealed. Going to be looking at maybe some scenarios farmers have been through this year and maybe some they could be going into in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. This is part of our partnership with the American Farm Bureau, where we put on these educational events every few months. This is a follow-up to our last one, which was Farm Marketing 101, where we kind of went over the basics of how to build up a marketing plan and education on futures, options, hedging, that kind of thing, spreads, basis. So now we want to get in there now that everyone's coming in out of the fields and go over some actual real world scenarios about what can we be doing now, especially if we have bushels in storage. How can we be going out? And like you said before, there's now carry in the market. How can we be going out and protecting that carry while still leaving ourselves open for upside opportunity? So we're going to go over some specifics on that, things that you can be doing. And then also looking out into the 2024 crop year, next year's new crop, if you started to invest in your inputs there, how to get a little risk off the table with what is still currently, above $5 corn and $13 soybeans. We want to be a little bit mindful of that as we head towards spring and not just wait until we produce a crop and shoot, in the case of corn, get into a burdensome stocks picture next year before we start protecting any of that price. So we're going to go over that, looking forward in a new crop next year. And then we'll go over just some of the current market drivers. What's moving the price near term, what should we be watching for, and what are kind of our near term kind of outlooks and forecasts.
Always great information from the experts at StoneX. Again, the webinar is coming up on December 12th. To get registered, just find this podcast at ohiofarmbureau.org. You'll find the link right there in the description. Tom Dosdall, Senior Risk Management Consultant with StoneX. Always great to see you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ty. Great to see you too.
That'll do it for the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. Make sure and like, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen. And until next time, we'll see you down the road.